average is not invited. Not if you're holding your company off-site in Las Vegas. We aren't on friendly terms with the bare minimum, and unenthusiastic is uninvited. Las Vegas's creative energy and world-class hospitality want to bring your company off-site to crazy new heights. That's why fear-based leadership is afraid of Vegas. And boring? Won't be there, but it will be watching the meeting recordings later. Plan for the extraordinary at vegasmeansbusiness.com.
It's back. The 2025 edition of our annual Pulse Report, where we unveil and break down the best user experience financial services has to offer, is out now. Our experts have been busy researching and analysing product experiences from every corner of financial services, from crypto to inclusive design. Find out who were named our Pulse Stars, the best of the best from 2024. Read our highlights from the state of UX in the industry. And discover the bold predictions that our experts have made for the year ahead. Visit 11fs.com/report to download your copy.
Hello and welcome to FinTech Insider Insights. I'm David Barton-Grimley. In this episode, we're diving into one of the toughest challenges for any company: how to launch a product and how to make it successful. Financial services is an industry where execution is absolutely everything. Launching a product isn't just difficult, it's brutal. The Chief Product Officer, or CPO, role is still evolving, being established around 2010, around the same time as Agile and Scrum was kind of coming through, forcing leaders to fight for influence at the board level while navigating complex collaborations across pretty much every department. On top of that, we've got investment tightening, high compliance costs, low retail customer interest, and the margin for error is smaller than ever. So today, we're breaking down what it really takes to launch a standout financial services product, prevent it from fading into irrelevance, and actually survive in one of the most competitive industries on the planet. So not a small subject at all. Fortunately, I'm joined by some incredible guests who have had that level of responsibility on their shoulders already. And first up, we have Corinna Lamberti, CPO of Chip. Welcome back to the show, Corinna. Please tell our listeners a bit about yourself and Chip.
Hello, everyone. Hi. My name is Corinna, and I am Chief Product Officer at Chip. And at Chip, our mission is to help our customers build long-term wealth and achieve their future financial goals, whatever they may be. And we basically do this by bringing savings, investments, and pensions together via a seamless, all-in-one wealth app. And so far, we've been helping over 350,000 people to save and invest on a regular basis and achieve their goals. And yeah, it's really great to be back, and very much looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. Welcome back. And next up, it's a FinTech Insider debut for Daniel Baker, Executive Director, EMEA Product Head of Core and Emerging Payment Rails at JP Morgan. Thanks for joining us, Dan. We can assume most of our listeners have heard of JP Morgan, one hopes. But please tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what you do there.
Thanks very much for the warm welcome, David. And hopefully what was the first of many appearances in the future. So I product manage all of the payment rails that we support across Europe, Middle East and Africa. So that's covering cross-border wires to direct debits to real-time payments, even some good old-fashioned checks and cash thrown into the mix as well. It includes the maintenance of these products, but I also have the privilege of being able to bring new products to market every year.
Amazing. Big brief. And last but not least, joining us from the other side of the pond, we have another FinTech Insider debut for Balaj Bana, Head of Engineering at Wise. Welcome to the show, Balaj. Please tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and how things are going at Wise.
Thank you for having me. My name is Balaj. I've joined Wise back when it was TransferWise 8 years ago. And what I worked on was primarily the banking infrastructure in Europe in the first 4 years. In the last 4 years, I've been focusing on the US. 3 years ago, I moved over to Austin, where we just kickstarted a new headquarters where we have 400 people now working on making cross-border payments cheaper, instant, and very convenient.
Wow, that's awesome. All right, we have our panel, so let's dive in. To start off with, in this half of the show, we're going to explore the strategies that will drive fintech product success. And I feel like it makes sense to start kind of right back at the beginning, right? And that is almost like the what. So what should we choose to build and launch? And as I think I was saying in the introduction, there's a really complicated set of stakeholders. And, the larger the organization, the more complicated those stakeholders are, right? You've got product teams, you've got leadership, you've got compliance, investors, engineering, all sorts of different stakeholders that come together to make a product. And so, Corinna, I think it makes most sense to start with you as a CPO, an actual CPO we have on the show. How does product as a role, as a skill, bring all of this together?
That's a great question. I think it varies. It varies like company to company. What I found like works best in a scale up, that it's still very founder led, and it's still very like mission led, is really like as product trying to bring together like the vision from like leadership and from a founder, together with actually like what our customers and users want, and really trying to like bring those two things together and translate it into a product roadmap. So what we tend to do at Chip is leadership basically has like a strong vision and a strong direction in terms of like where the product should go, and sets like those big ambitions and basically those big kind of like bets and strategic product priorities, but then basically hands those over to the product team and the product managers and the product designers and the engineering teams that then are given like full accountability and responsibility for actually coming up with the best possible solution to really deliver something that is like valuable for our customers and for our business. So it's like really helping to like meet the top down vision with basically like the bottom up like expertise and understanding of basically how customers like use the product and what they need and what they want from it.
That's awesome. And I guess that's almost like a canonical view of what product is when you're reading, I don't know, a book about product, or you're taking a product owner course, as I have. What you're describing sounds very familiar to me. And it's kind of interesting, I guess, Dan, coming to you, at a traditional bank. Does that resonate with you as well? I guess the perception is that it's in some ways enormously more complicated. I mean, JP Morgan is a vast organization. How does it work there?
It really resonates, to be quite frankly. And I see a very big part of the product manager role to bring all of those stakeholders together. We want to bring in the technologists to ideate on what is the art of the possible. We want our compliance partners to help us with those early red flags that we should be cognizant of. Our sales specialist needs to be the voice of the client. We need to be building something that makes sense. And you want to bring all of these partners on that journey. You want them to be excited about what you're building, what you're doing. I get my technology partner like chasing me down all the time. Hey, Dan, we built that thing that you said we should do. And like, when's the volume going to come? And, that's a great relationship to have and to have that experience. So I think it does, it all sounds very similar. Yes, obviously regulation kind of, does dictate a lot of what we do, and it's at the forefront of what we do. But not all regulation's bad. Some of it's progressive and innovative at the same time as well.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, Dan. And Balaj, I'd love to get your perspective in engineering, right? Because when we talk about build, well, that's you, right? That's you and your teams. Like, how do you work with product at Wise and build roadmaps and get stuff into market?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I go there, I just thought of this. So if we want to launch a new product, I think the most important thing to me is to have this before and after experience. You have the user before the experience and you have it after. So for us, it was bank transfers, cross borders were broken. It took days. And you were paying a lot of money to get your money from one country to the other. And then you used Wise for the first time, right? And it was instant, a couple of seconds, and you paid a fraction of the money that you used to do. And that's an experience that you will never forget, right? Most likely, you're going to tell your friends, like everybody that you can tell this to, right? Who to help their lives. And if I were to build a product from scratch, like that's the experience that I would want to build. When it comes to the engineering side of it, I think the most important things are there are non-negotiables. We call these non-functional requirements, right? Like the regulatory things are definitely there. But also the product has to be, how we call it is like semantically correct. And what that means is it does what you think it should do. So the customer will go through the experience that you designed for them, and there is not going to be like many hiccups around through that journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think all of you have mentioned customers in one way or another. I mean, how much does a customer feedback loop actually come into those product decisions, Corinna? Like, are you constantly testing and getting feedback and going through those loops?
Yeah, we definitely do. And it's basically like one of the key factors that we take into consideration. And it's one of those things that is absolutely essential to basically like inform and refine your product decisions. It's not the only thing, obviously. Like there's a lot of like quantitative data that needs to be considered. There's a lot of like competitor research that needs to be considered, a lot of like the business reality as well and the commercial reality of launching a new product. But we really like look at basically user testing and like gathering customer feedback to really kind of like refine basically our decision making and inform our decision making. A good example is like, I know loads and loads of times we get to a point where we have a few different solutions that we think can solve the problem, or we think can basically like we could bring to market. And then at that point, we bring in basically user testing and customer feedback as a way to essentially like really validate like what, like out of these like three options, or out of these like two different options, two different experiences, what resonates best with our customers and like why, and trying to unpack that and going a little bit beyond like what are our assumptions and probably like what we keep on telling ourselves in like a little bubble. But yeah, so it's basically like one of the key factors that's considered and that we use to refine decisions.
And just to kind of jump onto that, I think it's actually a really powerful tool. You know, if you're bringing customers on that journey with you, and they're bought into it, you know, they feel like they're part of that product journey. And it's very powerful in terms of building relationships, building that longevity, and really, you know, to Corinna's point, refining the product, you know, and getting it right. And it might not just be just the what in terms of how the product operates, but then you've also got like the wraparound ancillary, like how is the product service? What's the operational processes behind it? And being able to, you know, those things are a lot easier to tweak and refine sometimes than the underlying technology that sits behind it. So there's a lot of powerful things that you can do during that sort of that testing journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And have any of you seen an example where, you know, the insight that you're getting back from customers is actually, you know what, these ideas, we're not interested in them. In fact, actually, there's something else completely different over here that, you know, you haven't developed a solution for, that you get insight from customer testing. I mean, do those loops sometimes fail or throw up kind of erroneous results?
So I will try to keep it short, but what we advise, we really encourage engineers to take customer calls and have a close relationship with customers. Every quarter, we invite them for customer dinners where they tell us about what they would want us to build and what we would want to fix. And when I moved over to the US as a European, when I first spoke to customers, they were telling me, the app is great, we love it, but it feels really European. And first I went like, oh, that's cool. You know, like I thought it was a compliment, but it really isn't in the US. So we're starting to dig deeper and understand, okay, like what is strange to you in the experience? And it turned out that when you send money with Wise, we used to have this page at the end where he asked you, how do you want to pay? And that's where they would connect their bank accounts, and that's how they pay for the transfer. But in the US, most financial products has this as the first part of the onboarding. You connect your bank account and they never ask you ever again to like, how do you want to pay? So that was a big learning for us, that there are differences between these geos and how people think and what they expect from the product.
That must be so diverse across all sorts of different countries. Dan, I want to bring you in.
What I was going to say is, you know, from our perspective, we, you know, we spend a lot of time on our investment planning and, going out for, demand, etc. So there's a lot of work and research that happens behind the scenes before we get to, drawing a line of code. And so I'd like to think that we don't get to the point where we're going through that pilot phase and the client says, oh, no, you're doing Hong Kong dollars, well, I asked for Japanese yen. But coming back to what Balazs was saying, yes, you do start to see, some of those refinements in terms of like the visuals of where things are, or, some of the back end reporting and those sorts of things that can come out to play as you move along. And sometimes the client didn't know what they really wanted until they started to actually see and feel something, which again is why, some of that piloting can be so valuable.
There's a huge amount of rigor that goes into this, as we've been saying. These are financial products. Corinna, how have you seen this change over the years? I mean, I guess back in the day, in the early 2010s, there was very much this, let's just, launch fast, break things, done is better than perfect, all of this kind of stuff. And, quite a lot of fintechs have gotten burned from that kind of behavior over the years. I mean, have you seen any material changes or like a maturity in the way product is seen within the industry?
Absolutely. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there is still opportunity to move fast and break down barriers and innovate and make financial services like much more accessible. But I think it needs to be done in a way that it's remarkable and in a way that it's basically like completely like with very deep understanding of like the regulatory landscape, and then very deep understanding of like customer outcomes and like what you're actually like putting in front of your customer. And I think, I mean, we've gone through that journey as a like in the last few years, when you start having like a considerable like user base, you want to put out something that you're proud of, and you want to put out something that from day one, like your users will be impressed by and will be like happy to use. And don't get me wrong, there is still space for like beta testing and like getting something out like early on to a small group of users and like involve them in the co-creation of that product. But when you launch to your entire user base and you basically go out to the world with like a new product, it needs to be remarkable. It needs to be something that like considers basically all aspects that a product should consider.
Yeah, and it has to fundamentally work, right? As you were saying also, Balazs, like, it cannot
100%,
fail.
100%.
Yeah, we're talking about moving money and all of, saving money and all of that kind of stuff. So it's incredibly, incredibly important. And I'm curious to get all of your views on how you actually launch. I mean, so far we've been talking a lot about the process of, coming up with ideas, testing, getting everything in place, talking to stakeholders, all of that kind of stuff. But who actually pulls the trigger? And I suppose it's a loaded question, right? Because what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a financial product? Are we talking about a feature? What is the level? I mean, let's imagine we're bringing a new proposition to market. How does that decision-making process actually play out? I mean, Dan, I think it might be good to come from you, because from a big bank like JP Morgan, I imagine there's quite a lot of people who, are getting nervous jitters or wanting to have a say into how does that actually work?
So, once we're moving forward with investment, it's very much owned within my product team. If we were launching a payment rail product, my team would be program managing that. And we talked earlier around that big stakeholder group, from compliance to technology, et cetera, that, are at the table and part of that ongoing program. And we run something that's called Ready to Launch. And there's a very, very comprehensive checklist that my product managers have to work through. Make sure, have we got this in place? Have we got the, our operations ready, the client service ready? Have we done the testing and it's, very, very significant. And ultimately, like I said, it's a combined journey. Everybody comes to the table and has their vote and has their say. But ultimately, the buck does stop with the product manager, and it's them that will make the decision to say, yeah, we're moving forward. But like I said, it's a lot of rigor, as you've alluded to already, to make sure that we're checking all of those boxes.
Yeah, and how does that differ from the fintech world, Balazs and Corinna? Or is it basically the same principle?
I think it's not too dissimilar. Like the way we view at Chip is product is ultimately accountable for launching a product, but the reality is that like no product is just launched by a product manager. There's always like a massive like cross-functional effort that goes into like a very successful product launch, which obviously goes from like, I mean, the actual like, like cross-functional squad working together on it, the operational capability being ready to support like that product and that product launch, the marketing strategy and go-to-market plan being ready and being like fully agreed, like cross-functionally. So there's loads of different aspects. I think it's essential for like the product manager to help like coordinate and making sure that everyone understands like what the sequence of events should be. But I think a very successful product launch is driven by loads of different functions coming together and making it happen, and is not sort of the product manager.
Absolutely. Balaj, how does it work from engineering? Everything's got to work.
Yes. And from my perspective and from an engineering perspective, obviously, so when you launch a product, all of these cross-functional things have to check out, and you do have to have a plan for that day. But for my engineering team, I want this to be, don't want this to be a special day, because we want the quality to be built into the daily processes. We release Wise 500 times, a week, probably, maybe even more, right? So every time you make a change, you want that change to be solid, and you want that change to have a small blast radius. So we heavily rely on this concept that is the testing pyramid. So the cheapest way to find a bug or to find an error is as you're writing the code. We call that the unit test level. Then you have the integration tests, which are one order of magnitude like more expensive if you find it during testing. And the most expensive thing that can happen is if the customer calls you and says, hey, this doesn't work, right? So you want to avoid that by any means, but all of these steps of the software development lifecycle have to be like really, really solid, not just on the day when you're releasing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just a flick a switch and go away, go home, drink lots of champagne and hope it works in the morning.
Yeah.
No, cool. Thank you. All right. And on that note, we'll be back after this quick break.
Cybersecurity is the top concern for UK businesses, according to Vanta's recent State of Trust report. But whether you're a startup founder or an experienced security professional, Vanta is here to help. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks, like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, centralize security workflows, complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risk. Join over 9,000 global companies like Flow Health, Synthesia, and Alica Bank, who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.
This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV. It's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
Welcome back to FinTech Insider Insights. So in the first half of the show, we discussed strategies for a successful launch. So how do we actually put together this product? How do we bring it to market? Now, let's look at the factors that determine whether or not it's a success. And I think the first place we're going to go with this is measurement. And this is, I think, sometimes a bit of a tricky one, right? Because you might be able to say, okay, we measure success by selling product, maybe. But what is that product? How do you measure it? What metrics are you using that can tie back to the underlying financial instrument that is being sold? And in some cases, it can actually get quite complicated. So, Corinna, like, what are the types of metrics that you're looking for?
It really depends on the product that we're launching. But I mean, if we're launching like a new saving account, for example, there will be a number of primary metrics that we look at, for example, like number of customers that are opening that account, the assets that are getting deposited in that account. But then we also always look at a number of like secondary metrics. So, for example, how each like funnel is converting, what is the drop-off rate at each screen, et cetera, to really understand like, okay, the number, like the overall like number of customers we might hit like that objective that we had originally set. But like those secondary metrics can unveil like little problems or little things that you might have not noticed otherwise, and can really help you like basically improve further the product and improve the experience for your customers. So it's always basically like a balance between like the actual like, primary metric that at the end of the day like also drives like, the business outcomes and the business objectives that like at a strategy level you would have set, to get like paired with basically a number of like more experiential metrics that really can give you a deeper understanding of basically like, okay, how are like customers like using the product.
Yeah, no. So I think, coming back off what Corinna just said as well, it's similar, we want to look at the growth of that product and how it's performed and the uptake that we've seen from it. But, with ourselves, our clients don't just buy a single product from us. By and large, they buy a suite of products. But sometimes, going live with something new is that enabler that brings in a wider relationship. So, trying to look at some of that halo effect that a product can have as well, which can be slightly harder to qualify and quantify, but, absolutely something we look at. And then also we really want to look at, is it costing us what we thought it was going to cost us? Or are there things that we didn't factor into it, when we, originally launched, and actually now it's maybe costing us more, or, even better, sometimes it costs us less. So those are just a couple of the other metrics that we would look at also.
That's key, right? Because you might be in a situation where you're going, actually, there's something here, but you need to go back to an investment committee, which takes time to be able to go to get money to take the product to where maybe it needs to be. I mean, I've been working in banking for a long time, and I can tell you that happens a lot. That's definitely a thing. But I'd love to get your perspective here, and I'm going to also ask you like an additional question here. Are you seeing any automations in measurement for how you measure how a product is going through AI or anything like that you can apply to a product once it's out there in the wild?
The primary thing that we measure for customer satisfaction is NPS. We are avid like NPS like readers, and there are a couple of like tools that you can use around NPS, right, and customer feedback in general that will tell you about the trends of the customer feedback. But I still love to just go through it, like each and every comment and each and every like rating that the customers gave us. We also like for every launch, we also have some guardrail metrics, as Dan like talked about, operational efficiency or how costly the product is. We also look at retention rates, like was the experience good enough that the customer is going to come back? Is there a churn in this feature? And I think one thing that is also important is to look at this holistically. So we have thousands of people at Wise who are servicing customers, like customer support agents. So I would also want to understand what are the reasons why customers call us, right? And what are they telling us? And what is the resolution rate? So are we able to help them and resolve the cases on phone or not? And that also tells you a lot about the future direction that this product should go to.
Sounds very cool, but it's also a huge amount of data to sift through all the time. And to get that through all of the teams so that they can see it and make the right decisions for the right reasons. I mean, this is kind of one of those things that once a service is out there in the wild, it's those tiny little decisions on, hey, should we be updating the chatbot to understand this intent, or should we be, putting the customer a different way? Actually can make a huge difference in how the product is used and retained. Corinna, in your world, are you using any kind of interesting techniques to try to aggregate all of this data? I mean, I personally find it very difficult, right? It's like, how do we make sense of all of this?
Yeah, it gets quite complicated. On a like general point, like what we try and do is like we have the concept of basically like results reviews, where the squad led by the product manager essentially needs to come back after a set of time that the product has been launched. That time could be like a month, or it could be like 5-6 weeks, depending on the specific like product or feature, and basically present back an aggregated view of the data that they got from the launch, comparing it to basically the success metrics that we had originally set, and then basically make a set of recommendations in terms of like potential changes or potential tweaks that need to be made. And the data sources that basically we really try and like use to make that assessment is a mix of basically like back-end and front-end data that obviously we get from like how the product is used. But then basically it has, like Balazs was saying, is also getting like that more qualitative data from our customer service team. So really trying to extrapolate like, okay, what is the feedback that we get? We have a number of tools that we can use to basically like analyze like chats and understand like general themes. And then basically using any other kind of like more qualitative data that we could get from like, I don't know, app reviews or comments on some of our forums, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really kind of like aggregating all of that, looking at that like collectively against our success metrics, and then understanding like, okay, what are some of the things that we can change, improve, and is it worth us basically like investing the time like to go and improve those things? Like, is that going to move the metric? Like, is that going to help us move our metrics even further? Or is this something that like, okay, we've identified some problems, they're not super critical at the moment, so we can like leave them for now and like come back to them later. So it's really kind of like trying to bring all of the qualitative and quantitative data together.
And are you doing that over a fixed prescribed amount of time, as you said? And that's kind of key, right? Because you're saying that it takes a certain amount of time for us to get enough valuable data to make a real decision. We can't just put something out and look at it 24 hours because we don't know what that means.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And like, I'm sure it's probably quite similar across like all organizations, but usually like when you launch a new product, especially if there's been like quite a heavy like go-to-market strategy at the very beginning, you would see like a spike initially, and then really like after the first like week or so, you actually get more realistic data of like how people would interact with that product. So you've almost like discounted all of like your like early adopters or like people that have been like, I don't know, waiting for that feature or like waiting for that specific thing. And then basically you get like more realistic data of like how people engage and use like a feature or a product.
Yeah, super interesting. I'd love to pivot the conversation in the final little bit, maybe to something a little bit negative, or what we can learn from failure. And I think this is interesting, right? Because in our industry, and let's say in the startup industry, most ventures fail, right? So as a stat we have here, 75% of venture-backed startups do eventually fail. So a lot of these decisions that startups are making and businesses are making, banks are making, do end up by actually failing or not working. Or you have a IT failure, for example, right? There's been a couple of high-profile ones over the last few years in the UK. How do we learn from that failure? I mean, what are the more common mistakes? Maybe Dan, I'll come to you on this one, that maybe you've seen, maybe from other incumbent banks, where you're sort of going, okay, maybe as an industry we should learn from that.
I mean, look, Monday mornings can certainly be quite stressful for a product manager. You insert a lot of change in over the weekends, and it's like, okay, is it going to be okay? But that's, you need really good resiliency, practice in place. You need to learn from that. A lot of that can, be stemming back to testing and things like that. So we're very, very careful, do lots and lots of testing, before we're going into it, and making sure we've got those backup procedures and plans in place. So I wouldn't say necessarily that's, the biggest mistake, going live with a new product. I would say one of the common things that I've seen in the past is you've got an idea, everyone agrees it's a good idea, and there's client demand, etc. And then all of a sudden you kind of go, we're running out of money, or we're running out of time. We really want to launch this on the day that we said that we were going to launch it. So we launch something that isn't actually what we first designed as a minimal viable proposition. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, we wanted a car in this country and we're just unloaded bicycles. And well, it turns out nobody wanted the bicycles. Everyone's already got one. They wanted the car. And so, and then once you've gone live and launched, and that's not successful because you didn't build what you set out to build, then it's hard to go back and say, oh, can I have more money now and do that additional investment and get it to where we need to be? So I think it's very, very, you define what your MVP is and you make sure that is at least the day one requirement.
Oh, so true. Yeah, I mean, that really resonates. The amount of times I have heard, let's just get anything, launch something. It doesn't matter, we'll figure it out further on down the line. And then, 9 out of 10 of those decisions end up somehow in failure or a misalignment of expectations. Balaj, what have you seen?
I think the products that we've seen, like getting launched, were actually sometimes like really, really cool product, but it turned out that it wasn't really sustainable. And I love this concept by Jim Collins. It's the hedgehog concept. So what he did, it's from his amazing book called Good to Great. What he did is he analyzed companies who were beating the SP 500 for 15 consecutive years. And what he found was, as a common trait, is once they figured out what the strategy is, they had tunnel vision and they kind of acted like a hedgehog. That's where the name comes from. And there were 3 traits that were common in these strategies. The first one is you really have to be passionate about the business that you're in. The second is that it has to drive your economic engine, right? So you have to be able to be profitable. You have to be able to be sustainable in the long run. And the third thing is you gotta have a strong desire to be the best at it, and you probably also need a decent chance to be the best at this product and in this industry, right? So if all these 3 things like come together, then I think the most important thing is you stick to this, right? And you don't get distracted by other things which are outside of this hedgehog concept. And I think sometimes that's the thing that companies forget, and they go into things that are economically great for them for a while, but they're not really passionate about it and they cannot be the best at it, or they do things where there is no chance that they can be the best at it, and it's just going to be kind of like a side gig.
And just to add to that, I think like that 100% resonates, and I think having focus is absolutely essential. And sometimes it's hard to say no to loads of smaller things. But I think it's especially in a smaller company, it's absolutely pivotal to have that focus and be committed to that focus and believe in that focus. And then if things don't work out, being able to also say okay, we need to change direction and we've got good reasons to change direction. But whilst you're doing it, really, really be tunnel vision and this is what we need to achieve and this is why we have conviction about it.
It's so interesting. And by the way, so topical at the moment. For those of you who've been following the news in the US, I mean, Elon Musk, for example, is very well known for his hardcore mode, right? And, his hardcore mode is, he doesn't sleep, they move beds into the office, he embeds himself with the engineers and they do this. And over the years, in some ways, it's been successful. You could argue it's been very successful at Tesla. You can argue it's been very, very successful at SpaceX. Much less so at X. I mean, Balaj, you might know more, but the kind of the resilience of that platform, what you see online has just gone through the floor, right? You see the same also with what he's doing in the Treasury Department in the US. So it's kind of interesting. I guess it resonates to your point, which is you need all 3 of those things to work, right? It's not just a question of burning the midnight oil and, doing everything you can. It has to be profitable. It has to make sense for your customers and where it is. I mean, is there an FS lean on this? Is there anything, because all of the principles that we've all been talking about here, I think you can apply to all sorts of different industries. I mean, we've been saying that, of course, financial services is way more, it's way more risky, it's way more burdensome, but actually, these principles are pretty universal to me. I mean, is there anything specific that each of you are seeing where it's well, actually, for financial services, this is different? I guess it's regulation and compliance, right? Yeah. Everybody is nodding.
Yeah. I think it's understanding basically like the regulatory landscape, and also being able to understand like when opportunities are coming up from a regulatory perspective and being able to navigate those opportunities, which is probably where like other industries have like there's a slight difference, right? Because you're not like you can maybe like access different opportunities at different times. Here it's like really being able to like navigate that like regulatory landscape to really like grab those opportunities when they come.
Yeah, and our clients, look to us as trusted advisors. A lot of them, on our side, are financial institutions their own right, or clients that are regulated, and therefore they are looking to us as the experts in this field to help them understand the regulatory requirements, and for us to show that we're active in the industry and engaging and trying to help navigate that for them. But to Corinna's point, you do have things like PSD2 bringing in open banking, and then instant payment regulation is really expanding the reach of SEPA Instant. So yes, these are things that we need to adhere to and manage, but they also do create opportunities and competition as well.
Yeah, and I don't have the stat in front of me, but I think the regulatory burden is increasing significantly everywhere. It doesn't matter what subsector within financial services you're looking into. It's just this huge oncoming burden on top of AI, right? Which is coming. I think the UK just today published its guidance for AI in government, which is one of the sort of foundation stones for how it might regulate AI in the future. But yeah, I think we're all saying that compliance is the real difference behind it. So great, thank you, everybody. Oh no, wait, Corinna, go for it.
Sorry, I just want to add, like, I think it also opens a lot of opportunities, though, as well. Like, I mean, open banking, for example, like companies like Chip wouldn't have existed without open banking, and I mean, a lot of the changes that are now coming in from like a regulatory perspective to close like the advice gap again will open a lot of opportunities for like new solutions, new products. So there is like opportunity that comes like with changes in regulations, and I'm sure like AI will be the next thing where like we will see like a lot of new solutions popping up, and the regulator will have to like think about basically how AI can like help from a regulatory perspective. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that comes from it.
Yeah, so interesting. And if you can catch that wave at exactly the right time and bring a product to market as the regs are mature enough and coming through, then you can almost win in some ways, right?
Exactly.
This is very interesting. Thank you, everybody. It's been a fascinating discussion. And on that note, that wraps up today's pod. Thank you all for joining us. Launching a product is never easy, as you've heard today, but I really appreciate understanding what our guests all went through, and hopefully that has given our listeners a better idea of what they need to implement when they go to launch. To our guests, where can people find out more about you? Corinna?
LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, and also on the Chip Instagram account and Chip LinkedIn account. We always post loads of interesting material, so give us a follow. Awesome. Daniel?
Yeah, LinkedIn is exactly the same. There's a few of us, Daniel Bakers in JP Morgan, but I'm sure you'll track me down.
And Balaj?
Same, LinkedIn, and also on X.
And me, just LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you like what you've heard, follow our podcast and don't forget to leave us a review. It helps us to make it better and helps others find the show. As always, if you want to join the conversation, find us on social media. Just search for 11FS or Fintech Insider, or email podcasts@11fs.com. Thanks very much and goodbye.
Cybersecurity is the top concern for UK businesses, according to Vanta's recent State of Trust report. But whether you're a startup founder or an experienced security professional, Vanta is here to help. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, centralize security workflows, complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risk. Join over 9,000 global companies like Flow Health, Synthesia, and Alica Bank, who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider. audi.com/insider for $1,000 off.